She was born into a house where silence spoke louder than words. The village itself was small, hidden between dry fields and dusty roads, a place where life did not change much from one year to the next. People woke up early, worked hard, and slept with tired bodies and tired hopes. In that village, the girl learned very young that survival mattered more than dreams. Her mother was the only soft place in her world. Even when there was little food, her mother would smile and make the best of it. She used to brush the girl's hair every morning and tell her that one day things would be better. Those words stayed in the girl's heart, even after the woman who said them was gone. When illness took her mother away, the house lost its warmth. The walls felt colder, and the nights felt longer. Her father did not know how to raise a child alone. He worked long hours doing small jobs, earning barely enough to keep the house running. Grief made him quiet, and loneliness pushed him into a decision he thought would help. Within a year, he brought another woman into the house. He said it was for the child, that she needed a woman to guide her. But from the first day, the girl felt something was wrong. The stepmother did not shout at first. She did not need to. Her eyes were sharp, always watching, always judging. She treated the girl like an extra mouth to feed, not like a daughter. Small things became rules. The girl had to wake before sunrise, clean the house, fetch water, cook simple meals, and then help with any work given to her. Mistakes were never forgiven. If food burned or water spilled, the stepmother's face hardened with anger. At school, the girl tried her best. She liked learning, especially reading, because books felt like doors to other worlds. But school slowly became another struggle. Fees were unpaid. Supplies were missing. Her stepmother often complained that education was useless for a girl who would never bring money into the house. Some days, the girl stayed home. Watching other children walk past with their bags while she scrubbed floors, her father noticed little. He was tired, often away, and when he was home, the stepmother spoke before the girl could. She would say the girl was lazy, ungrateful, and stubborn. The girl learned to stay quiet. Speaking only made things worse. Silence became her shield. As years passed, the stepmother had a child of her own. From that moment, the difference became clear. The new child was protected, fed better, and treated with care. The girl understood her place. She was there to serve, not to be loved. Still, she did not hate. Instead, she learned patience. She learned to endure. By the time she turned 19, the girl had grown into a young woman with a calm face and tired eyes. Life had shaped her early. She did not complain, even when her body ached from work. She carried herself with quiet dignity, though she owned almost nothing. The village people often noticed her kindness. She helped neighbors without asking for anything in return. But kindness did not change her fate at home. Money became the biggest problem in the house. Debts grew, crops failed, and work became harder to find. The stepmother worried constantly about her own child's future. She feared poverty more than anything else. In her mind, survival justified every action. And slowly, a dangerous idea began to form. The girl noticed changes. The stepmother started watching her differently, not with anger, but with calculation. Sometimes strangers came to the house when the father was away. Voices were lowered. Conversations stopped when the girl entered the room. She felt like something was happening around her, something she was not meant to understand. One evening, the stepmother told her to sit. Her voice was calm, almost kind. She spoke about opportunity, about how life was unfair and how sacrifices were necessary. She said the girl was lucky, that she had been chosen for something important. The girl listened, confused, her heart beating fast. She asked questions, but answers were vague. "You will understand soon," the stepmother said. That night, the girl could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling, remembering her mother's voice. Fear crept into her chest, slow and heavy. She did not know what was coming, but she knew it was not good. Still, she had no one to turn to. In her world, decisions were never hers to make. Outside, the village slept peacefully, unaware that a young woman's life was about to change forever. The journey that began at dawn was long and frightening. She had never traveled far from her small village before. The village roads, narrow and dusty, were familiar. The path ahead now twisted into forests and hills she had only heard about in stories. The fear in her chest felt heavy, like a stone pressing against her heart. Every sound made her jump, branches snapping underfoot, the distant cry of a bird, even the rustle of the wind in the trees. She tried to tell herself that everything would be fine, that it was only a journey like any other. But deep down she knew this was different. Her stepmother had given her a small bundle with some bread, a little water, and a thin shawl. The gesture felt hollow. It was not kindness, she realized, but something much colder. She remembered her stepmother's face that morning, so carefully painted with fake concern, yet there was a sharp edge in her eyes. It was clear without any doubt that this journey was a trap. But where could she turn? She had nowhere to go, no one to protect her. Her father was distant and busy, more concerned with his business than the daughter he barely seemed to notice. The road became steeper as the sun climbed higher. The heat pressed down, making her feel tired and restless. Her feet were blistered from walking on the rough stones, and yet she could not stop. Every few steps, she glanced behind, half expecting someone from her village to call her back, to save her. But there was nothing but silence. Her breath came in short gasps, and she clutched the shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to protect herself not just from the sun, but from the cold realization that she was truly alone. As the afternoon wore on, the terrain became more unforgiving. Trees grew thick and wild, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a shadowy canopy. She had never been in a forest like this before. The air smelled different here, damp and earthy, with the faint temps of moss and decay. Strange sounds echoed around her, the croak of frogs, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of small animals moving unseen. Every sound made her heart race. She wished she could turn back, but even if she wanted to, she had no idea which way to go. By the time the sun began to sink behind the hills, she finally reached a small clearing. Exhausted, she sank to the ground, brushing the sweat and dust from her face. She ate a piece of bread, washed down with the last of her water, and tried to rest. But sleep was impossible. Every rustle, every shadow, made her jump. She thought about the stories she had heard of people disappearing in forests, never to be seen again. She shivered, imagining the unknown dangers that could be lurking in the dark. As night fell, the forest changed. Shadows grew deeper, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures began to dominate. Owls hooted somewhere high above, and the cry of a distant animal echoed through the trees. She huddled in a corner, wrapping her shawl tightly around herself. Her mind wandered back to her village, to the small room she had grown up in, to the moments when life had seemed safe and simple. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She could not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her weak. The next morning, she set out again, the forest still dense and confusing. She tried to follow the path as best as she could, but it was unclear and winding. Every so often she would stop, thinking she heard voices or footsteps, only to find nothing. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she could not stop to eat more than the small crumbs she had left. The fear of what awaited her at the end of this journey kept her moving, even when her legs ached. Around midday, she came to a river. The water was clear and cold, and she knelt at the edge, drinking deeply and splashing her face. The river gave her a small sense of relief, a brief feeling that life might continue beyond this nightmare. She followed the riverbank, hoping it would lead somewhere familiar. But the trees grew thicker, and the river curved out of sight. Soon she was lost again, the dense forest swallowing her in its shadows. It was in the late afternoon that she finally saw signs of life. Smoke rose in the distance, curling into the sky from what looked like a small settlement. Her heart leaped with a mixture of hope and fear. Could someone there help her? Or would they be part of the trap she sensed awaiting her? She approached cautiously, stepping through the undergrowth, keeping low and moving silently. As she neared the edge of the clearing, she could see simple huts, the roofs made of thatch, with smoke rising from small fires. People moved around, carrying baskets, tending to animals. But they did not notice her at first. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. trying to appear calm to seem as though she belonged. A woman carrying a bundle of firewood stopped and looked at her curiously. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone wary but not unkind. The girl's voice caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, but found no words. She swallowed hard and forced herself to speak, her voice trembling. "I am traveling. I need help." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come with me," she said. "You can rest here tonight, but you must be careful. The world outside this place is not safe, and strangers often bring trouble." The girl nodded, feeling both relief and a flicker of fear. She followed the woman into the settlement, stepping cautiously between the huts. People stopped to glance at her, some curious, some indifferent. She kept her head low, her eyes darting around, taking in every detail inside a small hut. The woman gave her some food and water. The girl ate hungrily, savoring each bite. But even as she did, the weight of the journey pressed down on her. She knew she could not stay here forever. The shadow of her stepmother's plan loomed over her, a reminder that her life was not her own. Once she had eaten and rested a little, she looked out the window at the setting sun. The forest beyond the settlement looked dark and endless. She realized that the journey was far from over. What awaited her at the end of this path was still unknown. And yet, she had no choice but to keep moving that night. As she lay on a simple mat, the sounds of the village around her. She thought about her life and the cruel twist it had taken. Her stepmother, the one person who should have protected her, had betrayed her completely. And yet, despite the fear, the exhaustion, and the uncertainty, a small spark of determination grew inside her. She would survive. She did not yet know how, and she did not yet know what awaited her. But she would not let this journey break her. The next morning, she rose before dawn, the sky painted with shades of pink and gold. She thanked the woman who had sheltered her and set out once more. Each step was heavy, but she kept moving, driven by a mix of fear, hope, and the burning need to reclaim some part of her own life. The forest stretched endlessly before her, the path unclear, and yet in her heart, a quiet resolve took root. She would face whatever came, even if she had to do it alone. The forest began to thin as she moved forward, the trees growing farther apart and the sunlight reaching the ground more fully. The air smelled different here, warmer and heavier, as if the landscape itself was warning her that she was leaving safety behind. Her legs ached, her feet blistered, and every step reminded her of the long journey she had already endured. Still, she kept moving. Guided by the distant memory of her stepmother's cruel instructions and the vague directions she had been given. After hours of walking, she reached the edge of a wide clearing. There she could see smoke curling into the sky again. This place felt different from the small village she had visited the day before. The huts were larger, sturdier, and surrounded by walls made of thick wood and stone. The people who moved around seemed more alert, their eyes sharp, their expressions wary. There was a tension in the air she could not ignore, a sense that the place was powerful and dangerous. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, unsure whether to enter. Fear gripped her chest. This was the place her stepmother had told her to go, the place that would decide her fate. She remembered the whispered warnings from the villagers she had passed. Through before, the tribal king who lived here was known to be strict, sometimes cruel and not easily moved by pleas or tears. But there was no turning back. Her stepmother's betrayal left her with no choice. She had to face whatever awaited her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid it would be heard. As she approached the gate of the settlement, 2 guards emerged, their expressions stern and unwelcoming. One of them spoke first, a deep voice that carried authority. "Who are you? What is your business here?" She swallowed hard and tried to steady her voice. "I was sent here," she said, keeping her words simple. "I am to meet the king." The guards exchanged glances. One of them raised an eyebrow. "Sent by whom, my stepmother?" she said quietly, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. She said, "I must come." The guards looked at each other again, their eyes narrowing. After a long moment, one of them nodded. "Follow us," he said, turning toward a path that led deeper into the settlement. She followed silently, her feet moving almost mechanically. Her stomach twisted with fear. Every step brought her closer to a man she had never met, to a life she had never imagined, and a power she could not comprehend. The path led her to a large central courtyard. At the center, a man sat on a raised platform, his presence commanding. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and an intense gaze that seemed to pierce through her. His eyes studied her carefully, and for a moment, she felt as if he could see every thought, every fear, every secret she held. The air around him felt heavy, almost suffocating. She instinctively stepped back, wishing she could disappear. The king's voice was firm, carrying across the courtyard. "Why have you been sent here?" She knelt instinctively, bowing her head. "I was sent by my stepmother," she said. "She asked me to come to you. I do not know why." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, making her heart race even faster. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the authority he held over everyone and everything around him. Fear mixed with a strange curiosity as she wondered what kind of man he was. The man who could decide the course of her life in a single moment. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer but no less commanding. "And you obeyed her instructions without question?" She nodded, unable to look him in the eye. I had no choice," she whispered. "I am alone, and I cannot turn back. I did as I was told." The king leaned back slightly, studying her with a new intensity. "Alone, you say?" he asked. "No one to protect you? No family to speak for you?" Her throat tightened. "I have. No one," she admitted. "Only my stepmother, and she does not care for me. I have only myself." He was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving her. Then he spoke again, in a tone that was both thoughtful and commanding. "Very well. You will stay here. You will be safe, but you will follow my rules. If you do not, you will face the consequences." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. She had entered this place knowing she could not refuse, but the reality of her new life pressed down like a stone. She nodded quickly, trying to show obedience, though fear and uncertainty churned within her. The guards led her to a modest hut within the settlement. It was small, with a simple bed and a few basic furnishings, but it was safe, and for the first time in days, she felt a small measure of relief. She sank onto the bed, exhaustion washing over her. Her mind, however, would not rest. She thought about the man who had the power to shape her life, the stepmother who had betrayed her, and the long road she had traveled to reach this place. Questions swirled in her head. What would happen to her here? Would she ever be able to return home? Could she trust anyone? The next few days were a blur of routine and observation. She was given simple tasks, fetching water, cleaning the hut, and occasionally assisting with small chores in the courtyard. The people she encountered were polite but distant, their faces wary, their words cautious. She realized that trust would not come easily here. Every movement she made was watched, every word she spoke noted. The fear that had followed her from the beginning of her journey had not diminished. It had only changed form, becoming a constant awareness of the rules, the expectations, and the unknown power that governed this place. Despite the fear, she began to notice small moments of kindness. A woman who tended to the animals offered her extra food when she saw her tired. A boy, no older than herself, smiled at her quietly from across the courtyard, though he quickly looked away when she met his gaze. These moments were small, but they reminded her that not everyone here was cruel, that there were people who lived under the king's rule, yet found ways to show compassion. Then came the day she was summoned to see the king again. Her heart pounded as she walked through the courtyard, the faces of the villagers watching silently. The king was seated in the same central spot, his presence as commanding as ever. He looked at her and then gestured for her to stand closer. "You have been here for several days," said, his tone calm but firm. "Tell me what you have learned about this place." She swallowed hard, unsure what answer he expected. I have learned that everyone follows rules here," she said cautiously. "I have learned that people are cautious, and that—" she paused, unsure how much to say, "that I must be careful, and that I cannot act without permission." He nodded slowly. Yes, you understand the nature of this place. But more importantly, he said, leaning slightly forward, I need to understand you. Who are you? What do you carry in your heart? The question startled her. No one had ever asked her that before. People had asked what she could do, where she came from. But no one had asked about her heart, about her feelings, about who she truly was inside. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak the truth. But the intensity in his eyes made her decide, I am alone, she said quietly. I am afraid. I am angry. I do not understand why my life has turned out this way. I do not know what is coming next, and I do not know if I can trust anyone, but I am trying to survive. The king remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, as if accepting her words. Very well, he said. You will remain here. You will follow the rules, but you will also have the opportunity to learn, to observe, to understand. Your life is not yet decided. But remember this: choices matter, and the path you take will shape your future. She bowed her head, absorbing the weight of his words. Fear still gripped her, but now there was also a glimmer of something else, a faint, fragile hope. Perhaps this place, as frightening as it seemed, could offer her more than she had imagined. Perhaps, despite everything, there was a chance for her to find strength, to learn, and to survive. As she left the king's presence, she felt the eyes of the people around her. The silent scrutiny, the unspoken expectations. The journey was far from over. The real challenge was only beginning. But she took a deep breath and steadied herself. She would face it. She had no other choice. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that the fire within her, the desire to live, to endure, to reclaim her life, was stronger than the fear that pressed down on her heart. The days passed slowly, yet the tension in the settlement never eased. Each morning she rose before the sun, her body tired but alert, knowing that at any moment her life could change again. The small hut she stayed in had become a place of quiet refuge, but even there she felt the weight of the king's gaze. As if it lingered in every shadow and every corner, she tried to carry out her tasks with care, sweeping the floors, fetching water, and helping with simple chores. But even the smallest mistake could draw the attention of the guards or the king himself. The people of the settlement watched her closely. Some treated her with curiosity, others with suspicion. There was a young woman, slightly older than herself, who sometimes offered her words of advice or a quiet smile. Be careful who you trust, she whispered one morning, passing a bucket of water. Not everyone here wishes you well, and the king, he is not like other men. She nodded, grateful for the small comfort, though her heart sank at the warning. She could sense the truth in those words. The settlement was a world of rules and unseen hierarchies, a place where a single misstep could change a person's life forever. Every glance, every word, every gesture mattered. She could not afford to make a mistake. The king summoned her again after a week had passed. This time, the summons came with a message. She was to attend a gathering in the central hall. Her stomach tightened at the thought. She had seen glimpses of the central hall before, a vast open space where important matters were discussed, and where the eyes of everyone in the settlement could be upon her. She dressed as neatly as she could, her hands trembling as she smoothed her simple tunic. The young woman who had given her advice earlier gave her a small nod of encouragement. Stay calm. Speak truthfully, and do not let fear control you, she said. As she walked toward the hall, she noticed the villagers' eyes on her. Whispers followed her steps, though she could not make out the words. Her heart beat faster with every step. Fear and curiosity mingled in her chest, a storm of emotion she struggled to contain. She reminded herself that she had survived so far. She had endured the betrayal of her stepmother, the long and dangerous journey, and the uncertainty of entering the king's domain. She could endure this as well. The central hall was larger than anything she had ever seen. High ceilings, sturdy beams, and intricate decorations gave it an imposing presence. The king sat at the far end, flanked by his advisors, his gaze fixed on her. As she approached, he gestured for her to kneel. She obeyed, her knees pressing against the cold stone floor, her head bowed. "You have been here long enough to understand the rules of this place," the king said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Now I must know more about you. You arrived alone, sent by your stepmother, yet you claim to have no family. That may be true, but I need to understand your strengths, your character, and your spirit." She hesitated, unsure what to say. Words felt inadequate, yet she could not remain silent. I have survived," she said quietly. "I have endured hardships. I know what it means to be alone. I have learned to observe, to listen, and to act carefully. I do not wish to cause trouble, but I want to live with dignity. I want to survive, no matter the obstacles." The king studied her intently. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, though in reality it was only minutes. Then he spoke again. "Survival is important, yes. But strength is measured not only by endurance, but by courage, by the choices one makes, and by the heart that guides those choices. You have been tested so far, and you have endured. But now, a new challenge awaits you. The path ahead is uncertain, and your decisions will shape not only your life, but the lives of others in this settlement." Her heart pounded. She had been prepared for hardship, for fear, but not for responsibility. She realized that her role here would not be passive. She would be expected to act, to make choices, to prove herself in ways she had never imagined. Fear mingled with a strange sense of purpose. She did not yet understand what lay ahead, but she knew that she could not shrink from it. Over the next several days, the king observed her closely. He tested her in small ways, asking her opinions on simple matters, observing her reactions to instructions, watching how she interacted with others. At first, she was cautious, speaking only when spoken to, careful not to reveal too much about herself. But gradually, she began to see patterns in the king's behavior, small glimpses of fairness and understanding beneath his stern exterior. He was not cruel without reason. He valued honesty, courage, and intelligence. And though she feared him, she also began to respect him. One afternoon, the king called her to accompany him on a journey outside the main settlement. Her heart leapt with fear and curiosity. She had never been this close to the king before. The thought of leaving the safety of the central area filled her with anxiety. She followed silently as he walked, the villagers stepping aside to let them pass. The path led into the hills surrounding the settlement, where the landscape opened into fields and forests that stretched for miles. "Look around you," the king said, stopping at a high ridge overlooking the land. "This settlement, these people, this land, they are all connected. Every action has consequences, and every choice shapes the future. You must understand this if you are to live here, if you are to survive and thrive." She nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. The view was breathtaking, but it carried a sense of gravity. She realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding her place in a larger world, one with rules, responsibilities, and unseen connections. Days turned into weeks. She learned more about the settlement, about the people, and about herself. She discovered reserves of strength she had not known existed, finding ways to help others, to make small improvements, and to navigate the delicate balance of power and trust. She began to understand that survival was not enough. She needed strategy, empathy, and awareness. And slowly, a small sense of belonging began to grow. Though it was fragile, easily shaken by the ever-present uncertainty of the king's judgment. One evening, as she sat near the edge of the settlement, watching the sun set over the hills, she felt a strange mix of hope and fear. She thought of her stepmother, of the cruel intentions that had sent her here, and of the journey that had brought her through forests, rivers, and endless uncertainty. She realized that every hardship, every moment of fear, had brought her to this point, and though the path ahead remained unclear, she understood that she had the power to face it, to endure it, and perhaps even to shape her destiny. The king's presence continued to loom over her life, but she was no longer paralyzed by fear. She had learned to navigate the complexities of the settlement, to read the subtle cues of the people around her, and to find small ways to assert her agency. Each day, each interaction, Each decision became a test, a challenge, and an opportunity. And she began to see that survival was only the beginning, that life, even in the shadow of fear and betrayal, could hold lessons, strength, and the chance for something greater as night fell. The settlement quieted, and she returned to her small hut. She sat on the bed, reflecting on all that had happened. Her journey had brought her from fear and betrayal into a world of uncertainty, challenge, and unexpected lessons. And she knew that the days ahead would demand more of her courage, more of her wisdom, and more of her heart. She was no longer just a girl sent away by a cruel stepmother. She was becoming a young woman who could endure, who could learn, and who could face the unknown with determination and deep inside. She felt a flicker of something she had not known, possibility. The days in the settlement became a rhythm of cautious routine and quiet observation. Each morning, she awoke before the sun, her body aching from long hours of walking. Lifting and bending, yet she moved with care, knowing that one wrong step could draw the king's attention or the suspicion of the villagers. The hut she had been given was small, but it became her only refuge. She kept it clean and simple, arranging her sparse belongings neatly, trying to create a sense of order in a life that felt as though it had been stolen from her. She learned quickly that survival here required more than obedience. It required watching, listening, and reading the subtle expressions of others. The villagers were a mixture of curiosity and caution. Some offered kind words, small gestures of encouragement. Others were distant, their eyes sharp, their silence heavy with judgment. Among them, a young woman, slightly older than herself, became a quiet ally. She offered small pieces of advice like warnings of which paths to avoid or reminders to remain calm when summoned by the king. "You must think carefully before you act," the woman whispered one day, passing her a basket of water. "Here, mistakes are not easily forgiven." The girl nodded, feeling the weight of the advice. She understood that this place was not merely a village. It was a world with rules and expectations she could barely understand. Fear had become a constant companion, sitting heavily on her chest. Yet she began to realize that fear alone would not carry her through. She needed strength, wit, and the courage to act when the moment demanded it. One morning, the king summoned her again. The notice arrived in the form of a short, formal message. She was to appear in the central hall immediately. Her heart sank. The last meeting had left her both frightened and confused. Now the thought of standing before him again brought a new level of anxiety. She dressed carefully, smoothing the folds of her simple tunic, and walked through the courtyard, her steps measured, her head low. The villagers watched silently, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and caution. The central hall loomed before her like a challenge. High ceilings, sturdy beams, and intricate carvings gave it an imposing presence. The king sat at the far end, his expression unreadable, yet commanding. As she approached, he gestured for her to kneel. Her knees pressed into the cold stone, and she bowed her head, feeling both fear and a strange anticipation. "You have been here for some time now," the king said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I must understand you better. You arrived alone, sent by your stepmother, and yet you speak of no family. That may be true, but I need to know your strengths, your character, and your spirit." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I have survived," she said quietly. "I have endured hardships, traveled long distances, and faced fear I cannot describe. I know what it means to be alone, and I have learned to observe, to listen, and to act carefully. I do not wish to cause trouble, but I want to live with dignity. I want to survive no matter the obstacles." The king regarded her for a long moment, his eyes sharp and unblinking. The silence pressed down on her, heavier than any words could. Then he spoke again, softer but no less powerful. "Endurance is only one measure of strength. Courage, intelligence, and the heart guiding your choices are what truly define a person. You have been tested, and you have endured. But now a greater challenge awaits you. Your decisions here will affect not only your life, but the lives of those around you." Fear and uncertainty collided in her chest. She had expected hardship, but she had not anticipated responsibility. This was no longer a simple test of survival. It was a test of character, judgment, and courage. She nodded slowly, letting her obedience speak for her, though inside a quiet fire of determination began to grow. In the days that followed, the king observed her carefully. He gave her small responsibilities, delivering messages, assisting with minor tasks, and observing the interactions among villagers. At first, she performed her duties cautiously, careful not to reveal too much or make a mistake. But gradually, she began to notice patterns, to understand the rhythm of life in the settlement, and to see small ways she could contribute meaningfully. She discovered moments of unexpected kindness. A woman who tended the animals offered her extra food when she noticed how tired she looked. A boy her age gave her a small, encouraging smile, though he quickly looked away when their eyes met. These moments were tiny, yet they reminded her that even in a world governed by fear and authority, compassion could be found. One afternoon, the king requested her presence outside the main settlement. She followed silently, her heart racing as they moved past the huts, through the fields, and into the hills beyond. The land stretched wide and open, the horizon distant and unbroken. The king stopped at a high ridge overlooking the valley below, and she took in the view. "See this land?" the king asked. "Every choice made here affects all of us. Every action has consequences. To live here, you must understand that nothing exists in isolation. You must learn to see the connections between people, between actions, and between lives." She listened, absorbing the gravity of his words. The beauty of the landscape was tempered by the weight of responsibility he placed upon her. This was not a world where she could act without thought or consequence. Her life, and the lives of others, were intertwined in ways she had never imagined. Over time, she learned to navigate the complex social structure of the settlement. She discovered that obedience alone was insufficient. She had to anticipate, to read the unspoken rules, to understand alliances and hidden tensions. Each day brought new lessons, often learned through quiet observation, sometimes through small mistakes. Every interaction was a test, every choice a reflection of her growing awareness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows across the settlement, she reflected on how much had changed since her arrival. She had come as a frightened, betrayed girl, uncertain of her place in the world. Now, she understood that survival was not enough. She needed strategy, awareness, and courage. She began to see that even in a life shaped by fear and betrayal, she could claim agency, make decisions, and influence the world around her. The king continued to observe, occasionally offering guidance or posing challenges that forced her to think critically. He was strict but not unjust, demanding yet fair. Through his scrutiny, she began to recognize that he valued intelligence, honesty, and resilience above all else. Each encounter with him, while intimidating, became an opportunity to demonstrate her growth, her understanding, and her determination to endure. Slowly, a sense of purpose began to take root. She realized that her journey, which had begun in fear and betrayal, had transformed her. She had learned to navigate uncertainty, to adapt to new rules, and to assert herself in subtle, meaningful ways. The settlement, with all its complexity, had become a place where she could grow, even as it challenged her in ways she could never have anticipated, night after night. As she lay in her small hut, she thought of her stepmother, the cruel intentions that had sent her here, and the long journey through forests and rivers that had brought her to this moment. She recognized that every hardship, every fear-filled step, had prepared her for the challenges ahead. She was no longer the helpless girl who had entered the settlement. She was becoming a young woman capable of endurance, reflection, and quiet strength. And in the quiet of the night, she felt a fragile but growing sense of hope. Possibility flickered in her heart, a belief that, despite everything, she might not only survive, but find a place in this world, a purpose that was hers to claim. The road ahead remained uncertain, the trials far from over. Yet she knew that fear would no longer dominate her. She had discovered a power within herself, a resilience that could not be taken away, a spark that could light the darkest path. With each passing day, she moved forward with cautious confidence. The settlement, the king, and the people within it were no longer mysteries to be feared, Alone they were challenges to be understood, navigated, and ultimately lived alongside. She had learned the first lesson of survival here, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And with that lesson, she faced each new day ready to continue the journey, to endure, and to discover what her life could truly become. The days in the settlement grew longer, yet she moved through them with a growing sense of confidence. Every task, every glance, every word she spoke had become a deliberate act, a step toward understanding this new world and her place within it. She was no longer simply surviving. She was learning, adapting, and discovering her own strength. Yet beneath her newfound determination, a quiet fear always lingered, a reminder that her life could change in an instant, that the king's judgment was ever present, and that the world outside was uncertain and cruel. One morning she was summoned to the central hall. The summons was brief, leaving her little time to prepare. Her heart raced as she made her way through the courtyard, the villagers' eyes following her with silent curiosity. She could feel the weight of their attention, and the thought made her stomach tighten. But she had grown stronger, more aware, and more cautious. She steadied herself, lifting her chin, and stepped into the hall with measured grace. The king sat at his usual place, flanked by his advisors. He gestured for her to approach and speak. "You have been here long enough to understand much about this settlement," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "But now, I must know what you are truly capable of. Your journey has brought you here, and your actions will define not only your future, but the future of others as well." She swallowed, feeling the familiar mix of fear and anticipation. "I have learned," she said quietly, "to observe, to act carefully, and to endure. I have faced fear, and I have faced uncertainty. I do not know what the future holds, but I am ready to face it, and I will do what I must to survive and to help where I can." The king studied her, his eyes piercing yet thoughtful. After a long pause, he spoke. "Survival is not enough. You have the strength to act, the courage to make choices, and the wisdom to see beyond yourself. But you must understand that power carries responsibility. Every choice affects others, and every decision has consequences. Are you ready for that?" She nodded, her voice steady. "I am ready." With that, the king instructed her to take part in a task of importance, a journey to the outer regions of the settlement, where disputes between villagers and neighboring lands had arisen. It was a dangerous task, one that required diplomacy, courage, and intelligence. She felt a surge of anxiety, but beneath it lay a strange excitement. Finally, her actions could have meaning beyond survival. She could influence outcomes, help others, and demonstrate her strength. The journey began at dawn. She traveled with a small group of villagers and guards, guided by the king's instructions. The path was rugged, winding through forests, hills, and rivers. Every step tested her endurance. Every shadow raised new fears, yet she pressed forward, relying on the lessons she had learned over the past weeks. Observation, patience, and careful judgment became her tools. She learned to notice subtle cues, the hesitation in someone's voice, the tension in a gesture, the flicker of fear or trust in an expression. These small observations guided her decisions, shaping the journey in ways she could not have imagined when she first arrived at the settlement. On the second day of the journey, they reached a village near the edge of the king's territory. The villagers there were wary, suspicious of outsiders, and quick to anger. A dispute had arisen over land boundaries, and tensions were high. She stepped forward, guided by the confidence she had slowly built, and listened carefully to both sides. She asked questions, repeated back what she heard, and tried to understand the fears and desires of everyone involved. Slowly, she helped to calm the situation, finding a compromise that respected both sides. Her heart pounded as she spoke, but she felt a deep sense of purpose she had never known before. When the task was complete, the king summoned her again. He spoke of her actions with a rare note of approval, recognizing not only her courage, but also her ability to think clearly and act wisely under pressure. "You have done well," he said. "You have faced fear, uncertainty, and challenge. you have learned not only to survive, but to act with judgment and heart. Your journey here has been difficult, but you have shown strength beyond what many could imagine. Her chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time since leaving her village, she felt a sense of accomplishment and self-respect. She had survived the betrayal of her stepmother, endured a long and dangerous journey, navigated the complexities of the settlement, and faced challenges that tested every part of her being. Yet now she realized that the hardest part was behind her, and the future, though uncertain, was hers to shape. Life in the settlement continued, but it was no longer defined solely by fear. She had earned the respect of some villagers, the cautious approval of others, and the acknowledgement of the king himself. She still faced challenges, yet she moved through each day with growing confidence, guided by the lessons she had learned and the resilience she had developed. One evening, as she walked through the quiet courtyard, she reflected on the path that had brought her here. The betrayal by her stepmother had seemed like the end of everything, yet it had led her to a place of unexpected growth and discovery. She had traveled through forests, rivers, and hills, faced fear, uncertainty, and judgment, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware. She had discovered courage she did not know she possessed, and in the process, she had begun to understand the true measure of strength, endurance, intelligence, empathy, and the willingness to act in the face of fear. She realized that her life had changed irrevocably. The girl who had been sent away in fear and uncertainty was no longer the same. She had become a young woman capable of facing challenges, making decisions, and shaping her own destiny. And though the future remained uncertain, she knew that she would meet it with courage, wisdom, and a heart ready to act. In the weeks that followed, she continued to grow, learning from every interaction, every challenge, and every moment of observation. She developed skills in diplomacy, understanding human behavior, and navigating complex social dynamics. The villagers, once wary and distant, began to accept her presence. Recognizing her contributions and her growing maturity, the king continued to observe, offering guidance when needed, but also allowing her to exercise judgment and independence. Through it all, she never forgot the journey that had brought her here, the betrayal, the long travel, the fear, and the uncertainty. Those experiences had shaped her, forged her strength, and taught her the value of resilience and courage. She realized that even the darkest moments could carry lessons, and that adversity, though painful, had the power to reveal hidden strengths and untapped potential. Finally, one morning, she stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the land she had come to know. The sun rose in the sky, casting light over the hills and forests, illuminating the path she had traveled. She felt a sense of peace and purpose, a quiet confidence that, despite the hardships, she had arrived at a point of self-awareness and strength. The journey that had begun with betrayal and fear had transformed her. She was no longer a powerless girl at the mercy of others. She was a young woman capable of courage, decision-making, and leadership. The lessons of survival, observation, and empathy had prepared her for a future that was no longer defined by fear, but by the strength of her own heart. As she returned to the settlement, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, she carried with her a profound understanding that life, even in its harshest moments, could shape resilience, courage, and wisdom, and she knew with certainty that no matter what lay ahead, she had the power to face it and to thrive. Her journey had been long, difficult, and filled with fear, but it had also been a journey of growth, discovery, and empowerment. And for the first time, she understood that her life, once stolen by betrayal, was now truly her own.